Fantastic. Welcome everyone to UX and ATX, our May edition. This topic that we're going to do tonight, the accessibility design career path, I'm super excited about because our panel of 4 experts is phenomenal. And it's very appropriate considering we are 1 week past Global Accessibility Day. So I'm so glad that you all could join and learn more about this specialization. But before we do that, I just want to say, wherever you're dialing in from, I hope that you all become members of UX and ATX. If you have not already joined us on Slack, Slack is a great way to connect with as many other designers as you can. So please join us there to continue this conversation and any others. This is a great place for asking questions, sharing research studies for whatever you're working on, general career advice. We'd love to have you there. I would like to also invite you to share anything that you see that we put out on LinkedIn, invite other designers to join us. And then be sure to mark your calendar for our next meetup. It will be June 30th. And that one will be about the intersection where product management and UX meet. We're actually going to have a series of lightning talks. So rather than a panel discussion, we're inviting several folks to come in and do short talks. One of them will be Pedro Duarte, who is head of user experience at Critical Software. And then we're finalizing our other 2 or 3 speakers. All right, y'all ready to get started? Woo! Okay, cool. So let me first go through and introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Grace. Grace Tay is a senior full-stack web developer working for the Ohio State University since 2018, and she has specialized training as an AWS certified developer and accessibility certifications through DQ University. Currently, she's also an instructor with the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies boot camps, and that curriculum spans the UX, UI, and front-end development. In fact, she is basically a co-instructor for me because I also teach UX, UI, and front-end development. Kim Krausberg, who has lots of letters after her name, is the QA Human Experience Analyst specializing in accessibility for BM Technologies. She built her first website in 1995, helped pioneer the SEO industry, founded a web design and marketing forums that ran for 20 years, trained in software QA, UX, and human factors, consulted, partnered, taught anyone who would listen for 25 years, earned the distinguished CPA-CC certification, and has been a featured speaker and writer with hundreds of articles under her belt. She never sleeps. She owns a retired racehorse, which I think is one of those that you ran after tonight, and thinks the X-Files and Farscape are the best TV shows ever made. In fact, I know that some of our organizers were right with you on the X-Files. Mally Holmes is an accessibility designer at CVS Health. She has experience in UX, marketing, and customer service. And in addition to her day job, Mally is a volunteer organizer for the Bay Area Accessibility and Inclusive Meetup, which encourages among professionals interested in digital accessibility and inclusion. And finally, but certainly not the least of our panel, Kareem Merchant is a product designer based in Los Angeles. After a career as a jazz musician and teaching artist, he transitioned to design, working with various companies from startups to enterprises to create inclusive and meaningful products since 2020. He's been helping drive accessible design across Dell as a principal product designer. Apart from music and design, his interests include playing games of all kinds, urban history, and collaborative storytelling. Can we give snaps and claps for our panel tonight? Thank you very much. All right, yay. And please correct me if I left anything out of your bios, but I want to kick us off tonight with a little bit from each of you about your journey into accessibility, or even just specifically accessibility design. Can we start with Mally?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My journey in accessibility started Kind of in college. I was a women and gender studies major with a focus on disability theory. I just fell in love with the theory. I took as many classes as I could on disabilities and didn't realize that it was something I could bring with me into my career. And so I was searching for jobs after graduation and hoping to get into diversity and inclusion. But it was really hard as an entry-level career seeker. So I took a job at LinkedIn as a receptionist, and that's where I met Jennison, who was the head of accessibility, is the head of accessibility there. And he introduced me to the field. Every time he brought in guests, they would talk to me about what accessibility was. And I just immediately knew that that was the path that I wanted to get into. And so COVID hit and I was laid off, and I decided it was the perfect time to sort of jump into the field. So I took a user experience boot camp with General Assembly, and I was applying to user experience jobs. I was not having a lot of luck. And I knew that as much as I loved user experience, I really, really had a passion for accessibility. And so Jennison helped me a lot in sort of curating my portfolio to make sure it was focused on accessibility. I took on an accessibility project for a nonprofit that my friend ran, and from that point, I was luckily able to make connections that could get me into the field. And so I started at CVS about a year ago, approaching a year, which is exciting. And I originally was an accessibility engineer, which is really funny because I didn't have any coding experience and it was all coding and QA. But luckily I had the opportunity to switch over to design 6 months ago, and now I'm back doing what I love and doing accessibility design at CVS.
Thanks. Grace, let's go to you. What's your journey been?
Sure. What Mally said is actually kind of rings a little bit true for me too. Like before I got into the tech field, I actually studied sociology and criminology for a few years. I almost got my degree in that before I switched over. But with that, I took a lot of classes in like social problems, social change, like a lot about people, understanding people. And at the time, I was also like an activist for different LGBT groups and all that. So inclusivity has kind of always been on my mind. I eventually switched over and got my degree in game design, mostly because it was like a really interesting curriculum. It was like, it let me kind of learn a little bit of everything. But I got to take like specialized training with that in HCI, which was pretty cool to start understanding that. After I got my degree, I've been with Ohio State about 4 years, and it was really cool when I started there because I was actually able to kind of create my own position there. It was a lot of networking that went on to get that job. But I basically was like, I don't want to pick between development and design, and like all these different kind of things. I want to be able to do everything. So I've been doing everything for about 4 years there on that team, which has been a lot of fun. I had specifically like with accessibility, I think one of the really interesting experiences I had within that was I went to Google I/O, I want to say it's probably a couple of years ago now because of COVID. But they had like the most interesting like accessibility tent there where you got to like be really immersed in like, it helps you really build empathy, like getting put in a chair and like they put headphones on you and wear like these special goggles, and it's like you're kind of simulating these different experiences as like a different kind of user. And once you have that kind of like empathy for that, it really helps you kind of care a lot more about it. They also had another activity. It was flashcards. So you had one deck that was like a different kind of disability, like maybe your arm's broken, like could be temporary, thing like that, or maybe you were fully blind. And then the other thing was some sort of modality, some sort of experience. And if you pick those two cards up, like how would you work with this experience if you had that kind of disability? So it was like a lot of different tools like that they had in this tent. And that kind of set me down the path of like being really, really interested in it. Eventually, like with my job the way it is, I get all sorts of training that I can do. And one of them was DQ training. So I got a lot of certificates with that that got to cover a big range. And eventually that also led to teaching UX and UI. So I try to bring those things I've learned with accessibility into that boot camp and try to share the things that I know with other people as they're growing in the design field as much as I can. So I think that takes me up to now.
That's great. That's awesome. I'm just going to go through my screen, and the next one I see is Kim. Can you share your journey?
I started out really early as a self-taught web designer in the mid 90s, and I got hired, and I still can't believe I did it. I animated the company's mascot and ended up getting hired to take all the magazines. There were 13 magazines, and it was my job to pull them from Quark into websites. And then from there, and get them into search engines. So that was my baseline start. And it didn't take me long to figure out, oh, these websites that I'm building they don't look very good. Here I am trying to get them into search engines and get eyes on them. And I think that planted the seed. And then from there, I just went crazy and just ended up in UX for developing software, and we built hundreds of websites. And they put me in the QA department and said, you're going to be the usability tester for our websites. And so I didn't really know why they picked me for that, but they had a PhD on staff who her thing was human factors. So that was, got fascinated by the whole human behavior, human factors, how that connects with web design. So on the job, I got to learn that as I was working and testing the websites and software. And unfortunately, that was during the .com crash, and I lost my job, and I began to consult. I began to teach, and one of those, whatever I knew, I could share. And then I also had created site forums for 20 years, and that was that global melding of people interested in marketing and SEO, web design, and then I threw in the accessibility forum, not realizing how deep that goes. Or like for years, I thought I knew accessibility and realized I didn't. A couple of years ago, I applied for a job at VMware, and I didn't get the job, and I was so upset. But the director of accessibility there, she said, "Look, you clearly have like a natural ability here and an interest in accessibility in it, and I knew enough to get in the door." So she said, "Get certified in accessibility," and it was in that process that I developed. I call it going down the rabbit hole. And that's when I found out what I didn't know. Like, you think you know, and then you don't know. And so now I work for BM Technologies, BankMobile, and I work with the devs and the UX department, and I'm the one who performs the audits for accessibility, and they take the audits and make things accessible. So it was a heck of a journey, but that's where I am.
That's really fascinating. Yeah. Kareem, what about your journey?
Well, I'm just kind of in awe of everyone else's journey. Yeah, I'm Kareem. I'm just to describe in case anyone needs it, I'm about 5'11", middle-aged guy, no beard or mustache, and I'm wearing a gray t-shirt. I look pretty like average, I guess. Yeah, so I always had an interest in design that like led to some early experiments in like Flash in the mid 2000s, so big up to everyone who's gone through that. And then that was in the context of being a musician in New York and a teacher and a teaching artist. And I think that was kind of the compelling kind of thread that got me here, because as a teacher, you have to meet people where they're at always. And I work with students with all sorts of abilities, including we don't use the term Asperger's anymore, of course, but like that was what it was called then. And I also had a student who he's an amazing pianist and keyboard player who's completely blind. And so work, in his case to give him kind of the experience that he needed to, and sometimes he resented me for it as well, because for instance, everyone had to do read music they had seen before, we call sight reading in music. So you literally trying to read something you've never looked at before. And of course he had a fantastic ear, but I would insist that I would get this is jazz, this is my background. So I would get jazz charts and with the help of the Lighthouse Center in New York, put them into Braille. And he would hate me for it, but I mean, I was like, you're getting the same experience as everyone else. And that's really kind of a thing that I still lean into, obviously, in the current job. And after that, the other thing about like being a musician, of course, is that you meet all kinds of personalities, and it's just a very accepting field, I think, which is really important. So maybe that mentality kind of got into my head as well. And then I wanted to kind of pick up after a while, I was like, I've done the music thing. I want to go back to design. And I went to GA, like some of the people in this panel or in the audience. So, GA, but of course there are other good ones. And then was a freelance designer, worked in an agency that also had a specialization for WCAG remediation, WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which I'm sure most people who are on this call know, but if you don't, that's what it is. And then from that transitioned into my current role, which is I've been in almost 2 years on the accessibility team at Dell. And it's weird because you're all in Austin and Dell's in Austin and I'm in LA. So, make of that what you will. In my current role, I do kind of I wear lots of different hats, but one of my chief roles is to advise our design system team. So, we're developing what we call the Dell design system. It's actually version 2 right now. And all the components and patterns and documentation has to be reviewed. And so, it's not just me, there's also an engineer. I know enough to kind of, get up in people's face a little bit, but certainly not enough to kind of, about coding, to kind of take that role on myself. And yeah, that's one of the things I do. Also do design review for other teams around Dell. Obviously, Dell is a very large company. Chiefly, I work within Dell Digital Design, which handles everything to do with like the IT and like, digital products and stuff like that. But, we might be interfacing with all kinds of parts of the organization. It's really good experience. And so that's kind of a snapshot of some of what I do. I'm sure we'll get into some of the other stuff, but great to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad that you introduced yourself like that and described what you were wearing. I saw that on another call and I'm like, oh, I should have done that. So I'm Cindy. I look amazing. I look 29. I'm wearing glasses. My hair is sort of red and I'm wearing a black jacket. Oh, actually, Kareem, you mentioned the Lighthouse, and I know that's not directly, related to our conversation tonight, but there are lighthouses all over, actually, including here in Austin. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what they do? Do you have that kind of knowledge where you can share a little bit?
I mean, I can, to be honest with you. I only got to see some of what they were working on. What my student was going there regularly, and they were helping him with all sorts of, from learning technology to providing resources to training. Obviously, using screen readers and using like certain accessible features within programs sometimes need someone to kind of help you use it. But that's just, I think, a small part of what they do. To be honest with you, I think there's a lot about Lighthouse Center that I either don't know or have forgotten. But like, I do know that they were very, very, because I was working with kind of the music side of the Lighthouse Center, but they're very, very deep in terms of like how they have resources. They can get hold of Braille versions of like books from, way back. They have this like ability to source materials and resources. And then of course they provide those resources for students and anyone who needs them, not just students. Yeah. So yeah, anyone want to add to that, please do, but that's just some of what they do.
Does anybody? Yeah, please.
I'll add to that. My friend is on the board, so I've heard a little bit from him, but they also provide a lot of rehabilitation services like transportation. I live in San Francisco, and they do a lot of just walks around the city to help people that are newly visually impaired learn how to use their canes and everything. And yeah, it's a really great resource for people with visual impairment.
I've actually got a little bit to add if you want.
Yeah, please.
So I'm Sarah, and my daughter actually, she is visually impaired and autistic, and she works for the Lighthouse through the Texas School for the Blind program, doing part-time. She is a teacher's aide in their tech classes. So she gets to audit all the tech classes, but she said they only hire disabled people. So most of the people in the location that she's at in Austin they're mostly visually impaired, clearly. So, but it's really interesting the way everything is there.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing more about that, because you mentioned it and I wanted to make sure that we touched on it, since I didn't think many people were knowledgeable on the Lighthouse and what they do. I want to go back to something that Kim slightly mentioned, but ask each of you about skills that differentiate or the skills that you need to be an accessibility designer, to differentiate yourself from other designers, or even just accessibility in general, because I know not all of you works exclusively in design. Kim, can you talk a little bit more, start us off at least talking a little bit more about those skills that you need to develop?
It was such a combination. That first job was a real wake-up call, because I was surprised at how much they expected me to know, and the one missing piece was that I wasn't a developer. And I've been a front end, and everything that was visual, and I built hundreds and hundreds of websites, both as for myself and as a consultant, and a new WCAG. And it was funny because one of the questions during the interview was, what are the up and coming 2.2 criteria that are coming, down the pike? I was like, wow, that was it. I was supposed to memorize that, it caught me off guard. But that was the one part that I didn't have. I had so much, but I was not a developer. And when I went to take the developer course at IAAP for certification, I did actually go through it, and I didn't pass that either. I did okay, but not enough to get that certification. And I was warned that it was one of the hardest certifications out there. And like law school, you had to kind of do it several times. Or if you want to be a police officer, they never let you go past the first time. You have to do it again. And so I would say, if you are serious about this as a career, having a development background is really important. It probably is the one piece that I did not have.
I see Grace with a huge smile on her face. Like, you want to weigh in a little bit, knowing your background as a developer?
I feel like most developers would say they don't know anything about accessibility either, because it's not something that it's not in any training that you're going to get through, even if you took a development course, they never cover it. It's right. I went through DQ and got specialized ones. I was actually pulling up some links here I was going to post in the chat. My first thing I was going to say, tools wise, empathy, because it's a big one on this, is just understanding that the different needs there. But for technical kind of skills, being able to, and this is something anyone can do, particularly if you have a Mac, you can open up VoiceOver and just try these things out and see what the experiences are like for somebody who's, and if you didn't have access to the VoiceOver for whatever reason, or any of the VoiceOver, you can even just hit tab on your keyboard and navigate a website just with a keyboard and not anything else. And just being able to do that is going to allow you to kind of test accessibility on a site at a very basic level. But yeah, I think it's funny because people kind of then say it's oh, it's kind of on the developers, you need to be a developer to kind of understand it. But every developer that I've met has no concept of what the accessibility is going to look like. And then there's no way you can memorize either, because there's a million different ways to make something accessible. It's this there is, I feel like it's, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but it's very subjective. Like if you ask one person, is this accessible? Like they may have a very different answer than someone else because of their approach to it, their history and their background with it. But at a basic level, it's, can you tab through this? Can you kind of just click through this without like any hassle? Can you go through this and have the same exact experience that someone with regular sight can do? But yeah, I posted in the chat some screener ones that has like some different technical ones that if you wanted to try it out and just see what the experience is like. I think that's always a good idea. That one covers like the Windows versus Mac versus mobile. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I kind of went, sometimes I go on tangent, so we'll see. But
totally fine. You know, it sounds like there's so much to know. Like, where do you even, so I guess based on what I'm hearing from y'all is that it's not just like a set of skills. It's more like can you give us some direction on where to start if you're interested in this, you know?
Google.
I love that question. I'm going to go ahead and take this one.
Yeah.
I agree with just experimenting with screen readers and learning the guidelines. I would say if you are really interested in getting into the field, the easiest way to do it is to just connect with people in the field, set up coffee chats and talk with them and see how they got into the field, what kinds of certifications they have, what types of experience. I think soft skills that are very important that you need to have for this job. You need to be able to communicate because there's so many times in this industry where you have to really fight for accessibility. People are going to make decisions that are not accessible and you have to be able to communicate why and also convince them why they should change it or document what kinds of issues will come up if they don't change it, because not everybody's going to agree with you at every single time. But in terms of getting into it, I would just say play around with screen readers. I have a toolkit that I can send out that has a ton of reading, a ton of courses that you can sign up for and sort of reviews on that. But yeah, just lean on your network and talk to people, and everyone's very excited to help you get into this field.
Can I piggyback off that?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I mean, if you're doing UX design, then you already know that when you don't know the answer to something, you go to the users and you observe them and you ask them questions and you learn about, and you do a contextual inquiry or something and you see how they use it in a situation, right? So, I mean, I know there's still COVID, there's still that kind of whole thing to deal with, but wherever possible, engage with people with disabilities. That's how you learn. I mean, this is actually one of the things that is kind of the pitfall of this role, I think, is that there is a certain amount of knowledge that you can acquire eventually that gives you the illusion, if you are like typically able, that you kind of know what it's like. You can kind of, figure out where the pitfalls are going to be, but that's not really the same. And I mean, we're all guilty of this. What I mean is, it's a really common thing to fall into because everyone's treating you like an expert and, it's like, about stuff, but talking to people. I mean, one of the things we try to do at Dell, which I think we can do even more in, but which we're trying to do is actually have people with disabilities represented. There's people on the team, there's people that we go talk to, and we're trying to increase how our reach of actually incorporating those people in user testing that we do. So, I think that's a big thing, because the truth is, the more you deal with accessibility, the more you'll learn it. And I just want to add one last thing, and then I'll shut up and anyone else can jump in. And that is, honestly, our job, at least as far as I'm concerned, should be obsolete. There shouldn't be an accessibility designer. It should just be product designer or a UX designer or whatever it is, human interaction designer. The point is, we should all be doing accessibility. It shouldn't be this niche thing. So, put us out of work, make us have to do another thing. We can come and talk in like another 2 years and another thing about, I do this now because everyone knows accessibility. And I'll shut up.
Can I piggyback off of that one?
Please.
I learned best by observation. And when you are with people who have a disability, they don't look at it that way. That was one of the biggest lessons I've learned since getting into this is that they wonder what's wrong with the rest of us. And why aren't we making everything so that anybody can use the website or the app? And that was my thinking way back in the 90s, was that, wait, the web, it's going to bring us all together. That was the promise. And that was what I had believed way back in the beginning. And so, like, for example, I was in a airport and I watched somebody reading something online, left to right or right to left, whatever it was. It wasn't the way I read. And I thought, wow, that is so cool. How does he do that? And then somebody else I know was talking to me about her kids, homeschooled. With COVID, the kids came home and she's got 2 autistic children. And she said, Kim, the software is terrible. They can't, this education software that these children are using once they get sent home, without that TA, the teacher's assistant, the parents don't know how to help them. So it was just sort of like listening to life experiences and then bringing that into my work and saying, wow, okay, people, my own mother, dementia, I used her as one of my user testers for years, because if she didn't understand something, probably a lot of other people couldn't either. And so that's I think, if you have a passion for making things work for everybody, you're 80% there.
Have you all seen a difference? Just because I feel like it's been an uphill battle just in my own work for explaining to clients that this is not something that you just tack on at the end. It needs to be built right in. Have you all seen a change in the way that your companies have approached this, or just in general, just in observing the industry? Have you noticed a trend toward more awareness around like this is going on?
Shift left.
I think I felt a little bit of that, like over the past few years in particular. I think that's like one of the big pitfalls, especially like legacy applications and other applications. Like they're all so reactive. Like, let's get this evaluated at the end and then mark like check boxes essentially, which is where like, I think that like, even with 2U, they're kind of working towards more of an inclusive curriculum. And that's like the really important bit, is like really thinking about this from the get-go. Like, maybe there's just a different way we could design this, that from the very start, like we're including this in a, like the way that somebody can interact with something definitely includes keyboard from the very beginning. And I think, I mean, I've had like that feeling that things are kind of shifting. I don't know if I have any actual evidence to prove that, but I felt like people have gotten more towards starting to move away from just, hey, this is a legal checkbox, to more, hey, let's actually do this because it's the right thing to do, which is definitely where I, like when I'm trying to explain to someone why accessibility is important, it's always pulling on like the empathy to it and trying to make it more like, hey, this isn't just legal, this is like the right thing. This is actual people that are using it. I think too, like our culture is starting to get more and more accepting of like people with different kind of backgrounds. And that's, I think, a big part of it too, is that naturally as we become more open with different kinds of people, our applications are going to be the same.
Right.
I think a lot of companies are also realizing how it's a lot cheaper to build with accessibility first than it is to remediate for accessibility. I worked on a project where we had a lot of accessibility defects, and we basically had to redo the whole thing because so many defects came out of it. And the whole time I was saying like, hey, let's just build accessibility in from the start. It's going to be a lot easier that way. And it ended up wasting, I mean, I don't have the numbers, but it ended up wasting a lot of time for everybody and a lot of money. And I think, especially as more and more lawsuits are coming out around accessibility, I think companies are realizing that if they don't already realize that it's the right thing to do, I think they're realizing that it's also the better business decision to just build with accessibility in mind instead of having to take all of that time to remediate.
Yeah, I think people have touched on the fact that, you know, first of all, we've seen companies being increasingly looked up to like live up to their values, right? That it used to be that you could just say we're inclusive and, you know, point to like I like to make the distinction between aspirational goals and operational goals, right? So like every company has aspirational goals. We want to hire more people who are, you know, underrepresented, or we want to do this, right? That's an aspirational goal. An operational goal is we do this thing and we incorporate it in our process. And here's the evidence, and here's like what our aims are, and here's how we're meeting those aims, right? And that idea also of maturity, we've also seen like a lot of disciplines like UX have got to this point now. We look at like maturity models, like where are you in your UX maturity process? And increasingly that's being applied to accessibility. It's a slow process, but I mean, there's two organizations that I can think of that every year release a report. There's Level Access, which is like a very accessibility, like they're like DQ, that's already been mentioned. They're another sort of set of experts. They do a report, the state of digital accessibility, I think. And there's also Diamond here in LA, which is run by Joe Devon, who obviously a partnership with I'm going to say his name wrong. Jennison. Yes, thank you. I don't know why. I just get nervous. I'm going to say it wrong and then I say it wrong. Obviously, they're behind Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So like that's his specialty too. And so they publish a report. And you can see, I think there is some evidence, if I remember correctly, that more and more companies are really considering accessibility. So I think we are seeing the evidence. It's just kind of slow going.
Yeah. I'm going to take oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'll never forget this. I had a client who told me he wasn't interested in that touchy-feely stuff. No accessibility. And I never forgot that because his target market was young people and selling products, but no touchy-feely stuff for him. That's what he thought we did in the UX and accessibility.
Oh, wow.
I do want to draw a distinction there, because there's like definitely like the groups that are like, hey, let's just like intentionally not do this because our audience is going to be, well, that kind of thing. But there's also just a lot of applications, like as developers, we aren't trained to think about accessibility as product. So there's a lack of awareness around it. So sometimes it's not, we're intentionally making this inaccessible. It's, hey, we haven't put this into the sprint to make the time to make this accessible because we don't even think about it. It's not something that's affecting us. So there is a distinction there between applications that just haven't had the resources or the awareness to do it and the ones that are intentionally like that way you just said, the very bad cases, like I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know we touched on the trainings and before everybody came on, I was asking about specific classes and certifications. I was just wondering if you all had any that you highly recommend. I know that Grace, you shared the link for DQ University. And if you want to add on to that, Kareem, I'd love to hear if you took any specific trainings or anything to kind of help you on your journey. Same thing with Kim and Nally.
I mean, definitely. I think everyone starts with the WCAG guidelines. By the way, Adele, we say WCAG. I used to say WCAG. And now everyone's just like WCAG. Actually, they say, so there's a whole spread of different ways of pronouncing it. But I think that, you know, one and I can pull up the URL for that, is one resource I found useful is their quick reference, where you can filter out by guideline or even by kind of type of discipline. But obviously DQ University, I did get a lot from them. I think they're definitely worth a shout out because they're just one of the people, you know, companies that have been in the game the longest and really know this stuff. And so they're great. But I'd say also, like, I learned a lot from the constant webinars that are being put on. We've mentioned DQ, we've mentioned Level Access. The Paciello group is another great one. TPGI, you can find them if you Google it. And they have lots of workshops. And of course, we had GAD, but we also had recently the Access U at the John Sladden University. I'm going to get that wrong as well. I'm going to like butcher all the names today. But like there was just an accessibility conference, which I was lucky able to attend. Unfortunately, that was paid. But before that was AXCon, which is DQ's own conference, which happens every year, I think in March, and that is free. So sign up now, or if they don't have it, then just keep it, bookmark it. But they, I think you can see past webinars. So, you know, feel free to check those out. And they always have a spread that some are more senior, like people talking at a like much deeper level for those people who already know quite a lot about accessibility. And some are just like entry level. There's some fantastic speakers. Like some of the best in the business are there. So, you know, that's my recommendation, I guess.
I love that. Any others?
Yeah, I just want to echo, this sounds like self-promo, but going to accessibility meetups has been the biggest part of my learning journey. I started off with no accessibility knowledge and was able to build all of my knowledge on my own just by going to meetups, meeting people there, listening to the webinars. There's so many meetups across the country. Everyone is welcome at mine, but there are also really great ones in New York, Chicago, San Diego has one, Portland, all over the country. And I also want to say I'm going to drop the link for AXCon because you can go back and watch all of those presentations from this year, and those are just as helpful. Going to AXCon was a huge, huge learning experience for me.
And I saw that Erica actually offered up Access U. They offer scholarships. Hit her up. Anybody else have any? Oh, go ahead.
Speaking of scholarships, before I forget, if you want to take the DQ University trainings and you are worried about finances, they do have scholarships for people with disabilities. So if you have a disability, you don't have to disclose to me, but and you don't have to have a doctor's note or anything. But if you think that you might be neurodivergent or have another type of disability, you can get those trainings for free, which can be really, really helpful.
Awesome. I wanted to take a little bit of a left turn and ask you kind of like your favorite part of your job, but also I'm going to follow it up with what is the hardest part of your job? Who wants to start? I'll leave that open.
I could jump in if everyone else is just gonna wait.
Go for it.
The thing I like the most of my job probably is simply, if you like to interface with other people, accessibility can really be the best because, you know, I'm a product designer, and obviously Dell has 150,000 employees, and they've got plenty of product designers. But I always wanted to be somebody who didn't just work on like the same product, like sort of 3 sort of like views or something, you know, for like 6 months. So it's really been great to kind of have this role and talk to all sorts of different teams. I'll just come to you with these products and be like, is this accessible? And you'll be like, what is this? And then you actually learn a lot more. So I'm in a kind of privileged position in that sense to talk to all kinds of different teams, and you learn about the process too, which gives you insight, because obviously one aspect that like we're beginning to address in design is like handoff, right? And we talked about shifting left, putting accessibility earlier in the product life cycle, so designers think about it and product managers think about it for requirements and product owners and all that kind of stuff. So that's great. Not so great, but actually it's still great. It's just you have to be a kind of the right personality. It's one of these ones where it can get really granular. And I think I'm on the testing and tools portion of the accessibility team these days. It used to be more integrated, then we kind of got bigger and realized we had to separate a bit. But I get the trickiest questions. And I make it kind of my business to know, because to me, I think that's one of the things that I value. Just, you know, I like to know what I'm doing, and I like to master my craft, right? So if that appeals to you, accessibility can be great, because you get into really tricky areas of like, well, you know, is if I put this on this background, is that accessible? And I'm okay, we all talk about contrast, but you start to realize there's a lot of nuance there. I mean, to give you an example, you know, if there's a meaningful image, the general accepted contrast is it's 3:1 against the background. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, by the way, perhaps someone can put a link in the chat to WebAIM or anywhere else that explains about contrast and accessible contrast and what that means. But then if you go look at like the low vision task force on W3 has the recommendation that if an icon is stroked 3 pixels or higher, or is filled, then you can have 3:1. But if it's less than that, it should be 4.5:1. So that becomes part of the guidance, and that kind of like nuance about, I mean, that's just to take a random example, but it's really useful. But it just can be really infuriating, because then you just find yourself kind of going down the rabbit hole trying to figure out like, well, is this accessible? And it's already been said on this call that people have different opinions. So it becomes kind of like, you know, is this accessible or not? And then sometimes it's a gray area.
It's great. All right, I'll call on somebody. Kim, favorite part of the job, and then hardest part of the job.
The greatest part is I view my work as a service to others position. It's not about me. It's not about, I guess, like self-centered. Everything that we're doing is for our users. Just everything. And it's once I shifted and got into that mindset, I think I enjoyed the work a lot more. And the hardest part is convincing people, especially those, for the longest time as a consultant for small businesses. And if I'm, they were petrified. You mentioned the word accessibility and they all thought they were going to get slapped with a lawsuit, and literally petrified. So again, my part of my job was to say, just do a couple of these things and with your WordPress site and you will be fine. I kind of want to give a shout out to Joe Dolson, who does the WordPress accessibility camps, boot camps, and teaches it. He has a course. He has a WordPress plugin for accessibility that is accepted by people in accessibility. It's not an overlay or anything like that. But that there is that target market that I think once we get to the corporate level, we forget that there's small businesses and mom and pops who are they're getting into the game now and they're hearing scare stories. And so that to me is the part of the overall attitude that I have. Corporate can be a little difficult. If it's not in the budget, these terrible discussions happen just the same way as a small business. So I think part of the job is to alleviate fear about what we do and just keep reminding people that, it's the right thing to do. And that a lot of what we do, the information and the resources don't cost them anything. And we're willing to go out and get the answers.
Yeah. Grace, or no, Mally, I just saw you come off mute. So
yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this because I love my job. So I'm going to start with my least favorite thing about the job because I would rather end on a positive note. But my least favorite thing about the job, I have two things. First, it is very emotionally taxing. I have been in a lot of situations in this job where I have had to convince people that they should care about people with disabilities. And that is just awful to me. I can't comprehend it. It makes me very, very mad. Actually, I can't remember the second thing that was the worst part because it was mostly that. And just like trying to convince people to do the right thing and make choices that are going to benefit people, it can get really tiring when it's something that you're so passionate about and when you realize how much of an impact it has on people. But I also think that kind of ties in with my bright side of the job because I have found the most incredible empathetic group of people through my team and my managers, and the entire design accessibility team at CVS is just the best group of people you'll ever meet. I also love that there is constantly the opportunity to learn. I think I personally have a couple disabilities, and I know that I don't use assistive technology, so I have areas that I need to learn a lot more in, but everybody that I've talked to has been so helpful in getting me to where I need to be and helping me learn and calling me in instead of calling me out, just wanting to make sure that I can make the best and most accessible decisions without making me feel judged for what I don't know. Because to be honest, in this field, you could be in this field for 20 years and still not know everything. It is one of those fields where there's just always more to learn. And it's been really wonderful that it's been a safe space for me to do that learning.
That's fantastic. Grace.
Yeah, as I said, I wear a lot of hats on my team, but focusing kind of on the accessibility part of that. I'd say the more maybe difficult, kind of challenging parts are with us, like we tend to try to move quick. We try to like, get our applications out the door really quick, and trying to fight the timeline a little bit to kind of get it into the process of like, all right, let's kind of iteratively test. Like first time we kind of get things into develop, let's do a quick rapid test, just keyboard test, not even screen reader, just trying to do that. So trying to get that, like I floated that idea and we still haven't fully pushed it just because it's like one of those things that does take time. So trying to fight timelines a little bit there. And then kind of on the development side of the house, in case there is anyone who is a developer here, is it can be really tricky to try to get something that's not even just compliant, but like a good experience. So like one example I have is like, I think it's drop downs, like the amount of work that goes into something to make it like, not just accessible, but like a great experience is like having to figure out if they type like the letter A and finding the first word in that list that's the letter A and coding it to do that and coding it to accept like all the possible keyboard commands that someone can kind of do. It can be a lot of work investigating, trying to go down that rabbit hole, and eventually you kind of have to close the rabbit hole and be like, all right, I think I've done enough because at the end of the day, I've got to get this out the door. So trying to get all that kind of squared away and making sure that you're balancing timeline and balancing good experience and balancing like requirements there. So I think that's the challenging part. And then on the positive side is I would echo the users bit of that. Like I've gotten some really cool opportunities to kind of watch users interact with the applications. I had one recently where I actually got to go sit in a classroom like at OSU with a bunch of students and kind of just watch them play with the applications and take all of their notes. And it's always a lot of fun seeing that and seeing the other people on the other side of it. So those are my notes.
That is great. That is awesome. There is quite a conversation going in chat, which I love. There was a whole discussion around the accessibility of resumes. And I know that they had a discussion, I think they resolved it, but I would love for you all to weigh in here to talk about like the ATS and accessibility and like how you can make your resumes accessible to those things, but also to anybody who's reading them. Do we even have an opinion on that?
I have a lot of opinions because this is embarrassing. I applied to my first accessibility job without running my resume through a screen reader. And they were so kind about it. And they let me redo it and adjust it, which I was so grateful for. But yeah, definitely an embarrassing moment. And after that, I just spent hours researching how to make my resume accessible. And so there are a couple of things that you can do. I wanted a very design friendly resume. And I want to say that there's this misconception that your resume can either look good or be accessible. It's very possible to do both. I would mostly recommend, and this might be controversial, but I made my resume a PDF and then went in with Adobe Acrobat and used their accessibility tools to set the reading order, set the heading levels, and make the entire PDF accessible. And then I went through it with a screen reader to make sure that all of those words were being read correctly. And that was my thing. It worked really well. And the bonus for that on ATS is setting all of those levels is going to make it a lot easier for the ATS to read your resume. So even if you're not applying to an accessibility job, it can really boost your chances.
Any other comments on that?
I think it's a paid program, but I know because I took it, DQ has specific training with PDF and Microsoft Suite application accessibility. Again, it's probably paid. I had it through my place that I work. But I think headings are like one of the really big, easy wins that you can get is just running headings through. And like, that's actually the same with web too, both web applications and actually iOS native applications as well. Headings are like one of the base level things that you can do to kind of help with that, built into all of the different tools.
Did I miss any questions in the chat? I tried to scan it quickly, but I'm not doing a good job of keeping up with it. Andreen, I don't know if you were watching any of the questions in there.
No, you got it. It was the one with the resumes that was there. Everything else is being, more resources. So I'm taking note of those as well. And I'll
Great.
share them as well after.
Yeah, we'll get them on the link on the website as well too, and in Slack. I want to open it up. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Any burning questions about becoming specialized in accessibility?
I have a question related to, job seeking. How do you prepare a resume, right? Is one thing, but how do you prepare a portfolio that would showcase your I don't know, your abilities as a accessibility designer?
I can begin to speak to that with the very extreme caveat that, like, if you manage to sniff out my portfolio, it's not accessible and it absolutely should be. So it's old is my defense, but it's not a very good defense. So definitely it's for now it's a question of do what I say, know what I do. But obviously that's when I get back to my portfolio, that'll be something I'll be looking at very, very carefully. I would just say kind of the same way that I think it's been pointed out maybe in some other sessions here and elsewhere, that a classic example of a mistake is you don't UX your own portfolio when you want to be a UX designer, right? So in the same way, if you want to be into accessibility, and I mean, I think we touched on that with with Molly talking about the applications, right? That's a thing. But then I think it's really being careful that your portfolio is accessible. And obviously there are some templates on WordPress that like say that they're accessible. You might want to test them, obviously. That don't take anything for granted. Whatever you do not ever use an overlay. Hopefully that's something that everyone in this call knows. If you don't, we could put the link what is it? Why should I use an overlay.com or something like that? Do not use an overlay. But yeah, think about the accessibility of your, test it. We've got some great links that have been shared about like testing websites. So test your portfolio and see what the issues are. And if you can prove that, and of course the other thing is that in your actual case studies, not just say about how you change the color contrast, which is the classic thing that I see. Go deeper, take it to the users. Say that like, okay, I tested it with, these screen readers, like the top three that often get used are, well, it's really top two is JAWS, Job Access with Speech, and NVDA, which is non-visual desktop access, I believe. And they're both Windows, but of course, then there's also, I know VoiceOver is coming up, and then a small bunch of people use Narrator, but it's not really the same. But try to test it with a couple of those, and you can say, yeah, I couldn't use this one, but I tried this one and this one. I think that's really powerful. It shows that you're keen and you want to try to understand what's wrong. And I think companies and employers will see that and see that you're doing as much as you can and cut you some slack, because you'll never get everything right. Like I could cover everything, and this is that we've seen this before with like alt text, for instance, right? The alternative text for images. If you have alternative text for all images, you pass an accessibility check. But right now, there's no one who's able to kind of make AI good enough to say whether that alt text is really doing the right job or not. It might be really bad alt text. And so that's a skill you have to get better at. So in other words, you're never going to be perfect at this job, and that's okay. It's just the willingness to engage with people with disabilities, to engage with the technology, and to kind of figure it out.
I love that.
I'm going to add one more technical thing you can do outside of like just keyboard and all those evaluation tools. There's also the Zoom, responsive design in Zoom. So if you zoom into your website at 200%, how does it respond? Can a person go through and look at that site? Like I know on one of my main sites, I ended up disabling all of the sticky kind of elements that are on there. So that way someone kind of easily scroll through it. I changed the navigation a bit to have a little bit easier experience. So not just like accessible as in clicking it through on just like a normal screen, but like trying to zoom in and like really kind of test the bounds a little bit there. That's something I always try to do.
I also want to add, if you're using a content management system, some of them are a lot easier to make accessible than others. I know, which one did I start? I can't even remember which one I started with, but it was not accessible. I ended up using Simplice with WordPress, and they had minimal accessibility options, and something that you can do with WordPress is go in and adjust the code, but without coding knowledge, that's very difficult. So I would actually recommend, if you're looking for an easy CMS that can host your portfolio Wix seems to have the most accessibility options. Again, with CMSs, it's very hard to make an accessible portfolio. They don't have as many options as they should for accessibility, but Wix, from the research I've done, Wix has been the best.
Kim, did you come off mute?
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that I used to do a lot of was to take something out into the real world. One of my favorite examples was to take a website or an app on a train ride, and where you're surrounded by people, and what is that experience like? Can you use it when there's all these distractions going on around you? And I just got that idea in real life because we were on a ride from going into Philadelphia, and a cheerleading team got on the train, and suddenly I couldn't read. I was on Kindle. Forget it. And I thought, this is a perfect example of trying to read when you're easily distracted. And people don't think of that as a disability, but this is human behavior. So I think the human behavior side is part of what we do as well. And we just we're not encouraged to take our products out into the real world. So then we find out by maybe some negative customer feedback that, oh, something's not working. And I wish that we were encouraged before, we go into production, like, hey, let's go out and take it out for a test drive. And, that's just my opinion.
I love that though. And you sound a lot like what Jared Spool talks about a lot, is like getting out in front of users early, asking them. And something you said also triggered that whole thought. It's not just like a permanent disability, right? Like there's also temporary disabilities and situational, and like at any given time, maybe everybody in the world is facing some sort of disability, or at least the majority of people. So if you can shift your mindset to thinking of, well, the majority actually are facing some sort of disability, instead of just say a minority of folks, that might shift the mindset around that quite a bit, what you all were talking about earlier.
Right. Well, yeah, you have a cell phone and you've just been in a car accident, you have to like call somebody or get insurance information. Suddenly nothing works because you're just so stressed out. Yeah. And what if if the viewport says it doesn't even let you increase the text size because suddenly you can't see because you're crying. My mind will go crazy with every possible scenario. But to me, that's user testing. That's real life.
Yeah. Molly, I think you answered the question about LinkedIn, but I was wondering if anybody had some tips for how to make your LinkedIn profile more accessible. I know there's some tools now where you can actually say your name and pronounce it for people, but that's not exactly accessibility. Do you mind sharing that for everybody if somebody missed it in the chat?
Yeah, I used to work there. So I know some of it. I just texted their accessibility person and I'm waiting for him to get back to me, but you can add alt text to photos in your post. I have never checked if you can add it to your profile picture or banner, which was the question. And I just right now went to look for that and couldn't find that option. So I'm going to bother them and see if they can change that, or if that's something that I'm just missing. But yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just alt text. I know that there have been some complaints about the alt text on LinkedIn being a little bit too short. So if you are not able to fit everything that you need in that alt text, I have seen people do image descriptions instead, and that way everyone can read them, which is also very nice. But I would say that's my biggest pitch, is just include alt text when you have pictures, because it's very easy to add and it'll really help a lot of people.
That's great. All right. I know that our time is going to be coming to an end soon. So I want to make sure, okay, let me look. Yes, we're going to share this recording in Slack and on the website. And then I'll leave it up to you all if you want to share your LinkedIn profiles. So I think we have time for a few more questions, because I want to end on kind of your advice. But before we get there, And if you have questions, please put them in the chat because I will ask them. I wanted to ask, so for a position, you've done all the hard work, you've taken the training, you've gathered the skills, you've improved your resume, you've looked at your, portfolio. What is the interview process like for a position like this? What can designers here or developers do to prepare for the interview? Kim, I know you mentioned it earlier about being quizzed on the WCAG. So what advice do you have as they prepare to move into this field? That's up for anybody to start.
Yeah, so I want to just first say that there's so many different types of roles in accessibility. CVS has a design position and an engineering position, and they're both very different. Other companies with smaller accessibility programs sometimes have accessibility subject matter experts, which tends to be a little bit more of both at the same time. I don't really do a lot of engineering on my part of the job. I mean, I do a decent amount of engineering, but it's not in all of my day-to-day. And so I would really make sure that you understand what the requirements are for the position that you're applying for. I know that's probably information you've heard already, but since accessibility is such a new field, and since there are so many different ways that companies organize their programs, I would really recommend that. Also, I recommend studying your WCAG guidelines, making sure your resume is accessible. And just, I think one of the things that I look for the most when I'm hiring people is just that passion for accessibility. Just really make sure that people know why you want to be in your field. And yeah, I think just like letting that passion shine through is really important.
I'm gonna piggyback on a little bit because I was recently helping interview some people that were going to an accessibility position. Some of the things that I was kind of looking for was one of the big questions that we would ask is like, how would you balance it if you had like 100 websites come to you and they all need accessibility, like evaluations or whatever? So how would you kind of balance the priorities there? And just to like kind of, again, more soft skill kind of things. But I think one of the more interesting responses I heard that I thought resonated really well was just like trying to pick the things that had the most impact. Like if like this one website, if you made that accessible, it would kind of trickle down and the impact of that would be kind of seen throughout more than just that one, maybe prioritizing that one that has that more global impact. So I know that we kind of looked at things like that for the interviewees. And then things about like the UX research process, so really that whole thought about accessibility not just being like a reactive thing, but how do you kind of integrate it into the thought process, and how does your brain kind of work with all these things, and are you kind of viewing this as more of like a compliance thing, or are you viewing it because of inclusivity? So those are kind of like the things that I kind of read between the lines on to try to like listen to. Also, I really wanted to comment on Kareem's, I like the memorize all the vocabulary criteria.
Can I share a story about that really quickly?
Please.
So in one of my interviews, I was asked what one of the criteria meant, and it was like a very obscure one. I can't even remember exactly what it was, but it was one of like the AAA requirements, which is like the highest level. And it was in like the new version, and I had no idea what it was. And I still got the job because I'm sorry. I'm sorry to know. I still got the job because when I answered the question, I let them know that I didn't know it, and I let them know how I would think through that process. And I think that in this field, it really is impossible to know everything, especially when you're nervous for an interview and you might get a little stumped just from nerves. It really is impossible to know everything. And so I think just going through your thought process and how you would approach a problem is so important, because at the end of the day, you can look up the guidelines at your job, you can talk to people. The really important thing is just understanding what your thought process is for finding an accessible solution.
And the other thing is guidelines change over time. So even if you think
Right.
it's the right answer, it might not be the right answer anymore. So you need to
Yeah.
continually challenge like any assumptions you have. That's why I always try to like Google things like before I like definitively say this is the answer. Like, let me double check that this is still the requirement. This is still what we're looking for.
Yeah. I would add two things to that. Maybe this is Kareem. The first is have an opinion on what accessibility is, because probably the first question you're going to ask is, what does accessibility mean to you? And if you haven't thought about that, like maybe you have an opinion, but you just haven't like voiced it out, then you're going to stumble at the gate. Like you should know what accessibility means to you. So think about that. The other thing is I'm looking for a link. I don't know if it's on TPGI, that's the Paciella group that we mentioned, or a different site. So maybe one of my esteemed colleagues can help me out if you know where this is. But one of these groups has published like draft requirements for accessibility by role. So like product designer requirements, product manager requirements. This is language that like companies that don't know what they're looking for can just put into their job requirements. So guess what? You could go look at that and be like, oh yeah, like this is what I need to do. And of course, as we've been saying, you don't need to know all of it. You just need to be engaging with as much as you can and show, you know, that you're keen and that that matters to you. Because obviously, it's what somebody mentioned, like that compliance versus, you know, actually caring about what you do. The great thing about this field is that like 99% of the people you meet are like the most empathetic, caring people you'll ever meet, which is wonderful. So, you know, that too, but definitely the requirements, you know, like for jobs, I mean, for like the sort of knowledge that you should be able to speak to.
Yeah. Kim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I am the SME where I work. And so I have to be able to understand the code so that I can communicate with the UX or the dev side. And so I'm into the source code, and it really, really helps that I have at least some sort of knowledge of how to read it, and so that I can communicate with them. I don't know if that was a request or requirement for the job, but it's definitely helped a lot. That I don't remember them saying, can you read code? But it's, and the other thing I wanted to mention was native app testing. We didn't really talk about that. And that's a side of accessibility testing that there's not a whole lot of information out there for how to do that. Web, yes, because we have the tools, but depending on how the app is developed, there aren't that many tools. So that just kind of makes the job harder.
Yeah. This is great. I was scanning, looking for questions. I don't think I saw any, but the resources, love them. So I'll make sure that we compile all these resources to share out. I do have one more question because I know we're coming up on 8 o'clock Central. What piece of advice would you give to a person that would like to go into accessibility design? What would be your advice to them?
Don't assume you know everything, and just be willing to kind of challenge your own assumptions and Google things and research things, and just be very open-minded to different experiences. Even like, and some things are going to conflict, like accessibility rules, with actual experience for a user. So just being kind of aware of those things. And if somebody who is actually has that kind of disability is telling you that, okay, yeah, sure, the WCAG says that, but I'm actually a person here. I'm trying to use it and it's not working. Being open-minded to those kinds of things, being willing to shift and adjust.
Great.
That was the perfect answer. I was actually going to say something along those lines, but so I copy all of that. And I would also say just lean on your network, continue to meet people within the field. When I was applying, I set up a lot of coffee chats, and I had 5 or 6 people sending me jobs daily to apply to. And that was just so helpful. It's such a small community that for me personally, if I know that you're interested in getting in accessibility and I think you would be a good fit, even if I can't get you into CVS, I have so many friends that are looking to hire people. And so just like really lean on your network and find people that can advocate for you, because it's a really fun and connected community, and we all want more people in accessibility. And so I think just knowing more people that are going to advocate to get you in is really going to be helpful.
I mean, everyone's already covered some really great points. I would just add, you know, I wanted to get this in. I was like, at some point in this, I want to say this because it's my favorite saying. So I get to say it now. And I wish I knew who said it. It's somebody on Twitter who I think also self-identifies as disabled. And I think it's an intersectional. I think they're actually in several communities, but I can't remember who they are. So I apologize to that person. But they said, accessibility isn't the goal, it's the tool. And I think that's one of the most powerful things I've heard, because the truth is, you know, it's like we all need to get past this accessibility thing and get to the stuff that really matters. This week, we've been talking about things that really matter. I'm not gonna get any more political than that. But like, you know, the truth is that accessibility is really, while it seems like an end in itself, it really isn't. And so I don't know, I'm kind of diverging from the career advice. This is not maybe this wasn't the best time to say that, but like at least I got it in. So, you know, but I think, I guess from that, I would just say incorporate it into your practice. Like, don't think of it as accessibility skills. And now I'm going to put this and differentiate myself. Just make it a part of what you do, make it holistic. So that's my advice. Kind of got back there.
I love that.
I just wanted to add that I find a lot of inspiration in Medium. There's a lot of really good writers there, and a lot of them specialize in writing about accessibility. So that's another free resource, but also sometimes if I feel like I need some inspiration, that's where I go to find, okay, who's writing about what? There's some really good writers there.
Kim, Kareem, Grace, Mally, thank you all so much for joining us tonight and talking about your work and encouraging all of us to make it part of our practice. I'd like to give you a round of applause for joining us. I hope the rest of everybody will react in some way. Thank you. If you haven't already shared your LinkedIn's and are willing to do so, please do that. Hopefully we can continue this conversation on Slack. And again, I'm saving the chat. We'll compile all the resources and put them together for you. Maybe we can start a resource library for folks on our website at UX and ATX. With that, thank you all for joining us tonight. I will see you all on June 30th for our next meetup, and hopefully hear from you on Slack. In the meantime, you all have a wonderful rest of your evening. Really appreciate you. Have a good night, everybody. I'll stay around for a couple questions if anybody has any. Mally, Grace, seriously, Kareem, you guys are great. Thank you so much for joining us.